Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing fabulously, thank you very much, and all the better for spending some quality time with you, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. Don't forget to get that quintessential drink, whether it's an icy cold drink to keep you lovely and cool, or a warm drink to keep you lovely and warm. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. It was a day like any other for me, as a professional mobile dog groomer. Well, so I thought. Yet it was a day that turned out so bizarre, when our reality collides with legendary creatures of myth, which forces you to conclude that maybe the world is strikingly different to what it actually seems. For if these creatures do indeed exist in our reality, well, what else is out there that is beyond our grasp or comprehension? Quite a lot, I should imagine, or hasten to guess. On this particular day, I glanced at my diary, at the long list of all the people requiring my services outside the Portland area, a rural jurisdiction where I would travel around to my local clients, which ranged from dog owners of tiny toy dogs, from Pomeranians to teacup-sized Yorkshire Terriers, to strapping dogs like Great Danes or Pyrenees mountain dogs. These days, my streamlined business had become efficacious and decidedly efficient, as I could wash and groom the dogs at the client's home in my portable van, which meant the dogs never had to leave their homes in order to get groomed. Many clients loved it that way, as some dogs feel separation anxiety when they're away from their owners. In the olden days when I'd first started my business, things were a lot more unpretentious and rudimentary, pretty simplistic really. I would arrive at the client's home, washing, grooming and styling their dogs on the outside lawn of their backyards, armed with their hose pipes, but not anymore. I had stepped up a long way in the world. My life had exponentially changed with Pegasus Poms, my mobile grooming business, now a serious competitor in the marketplace. It now sported its own fancy designer van, eloquently inscripted with its curly, stylized fancy pink logo, along with a luxurious, well-planned interior, which I'd personally designed to cater for all my needs, offering our furry friends both comfort and luxury. It consisted of all the mod cons you could think of for grooming purposes, which included a large inbuilt washing tub, hot and cold water faucets, shower attachment, dryer, grooming shelf, inbuilt drawers for accessories. I had everything. I was fortunate to have really loyal clients with dogs that were very familiar with me. I would sing to them as I washed, dried and trimmed their hair. I always find my singing calmed them down, as I learnt that raising your voice in an excitable tone can be exceedingly reassuring for our furry friends. It worked every time. For many of my dogs, grooming was not something they actually appreciated, especially on freezing cold winter's days, when being washed, even in a warm shower, went down with about as much enthusiasm as a lead balloon. It was tolerable for most, if not a little annoying, but clipping nails could potentially be traumatic, especially if you accidentally drew blood, which can easily happen to the best and most skilled of us. I really derived a great deal of pleasure from transforming a dog from a bedraggled bundle of matted fur into a silken dream. I love nothing better than observing the owner's reaction when their new transformed pooch looked good enough to walk down the red carpet of one of Hollywood's most grandiose hotels and not look out of place. One of my clients was an Afghan hound called Suki, who absolutely knew that she looked magnificent after she'd been groomed. She loved being brushed and fussed over until her hair shone and gleamed. I think she knew that after her hair had been groomed, everyone would stop to admire her. She looked so fabulous. She knew it. Of that, I was in no doubt. I think I rarely enjoyed the creative aspect of my job, as being a groomer requires skill, but also creativity. It is that artistic side that brings my job to life. But the best part of it all is the relationships I build with my clients and their dogs. I find owners are willing to spend big money on their animals. For many, their dogs are as important and significant as any other member of their family. On this particular day, I had about 5 dogs to groom in the morning. It was pretty plain sailing until I got to dog number 5. This was the dog that I left last. She was very naughty, a Yorkshire Terrier called Molly Moo, who rarely had a mind of her own. She was incredibly stubborn, despising and loathing everything to do with being groomed. It would seem that she never failed to recognize the sound of my van approaching their house. She knew what my van meant. Wet hair, nail clippings, cut hair, none of which she relished or even welcomed. Like greased lightning, she would run under her owner's large queen-size bed for cover, refusing to come out. I was the one that had to bribe her out of her hiding place by climbing down on all fours, peering at the little frightened dark eyes staring back at me, dangling tempting pieces of chicken in front of her nose. Slowly and surely the smell would prove too irresistible, and finally she would move towards the chicken, taking a piece, and then I would grab her. I wasn't letting go under any circumstances. I would then carry her swiftly back to my van, where I would place her down in the bathtub, dispersing the warm shower over her tiny body, lathering her soft, almost human-like hair, all down with soap. She hated the water, despite her small size, but this little ball of fluff could put on a big song and dance. The whole traumatic, distressing grooming session involved yaps, squeals, and lots of fighting back with tiny paws, along with a few little nips. It was always a painful, drawn-out affair, of which neither party ever emerged unscathed. I groaned at the prospect of the daunting, somewhat taxing task that lay ahead of me on this late morning. I wasn't delighting in the idea of bribing Molly Moo, or getting down on my hands and knees on the hard, unyielding parquet floor yet again. The season was already changing, with autumn now well on its way, so things were considerably more chilly. I do find operating my business significantly more challenging in the winter months, for the animals and groomers alike. I drove down the quaint little white pebble drive, parking my van beside the front door of the rather twee-looking cottage, with its large sash windows, whitewashed walls, and grey slate roof, which was really rather picturesque and beguiling, surrounded by so much lavish green countryside, but a little off the beaten track for an elderly lady living all on her own. Virginia Wedderburn lived in an enviable part of the world. The rich emerald green views beyond her backyard were transfixing and mesmerising, to say the least, consisting of acres of verdant, rich forest, comprised mainly of tall Douglas fir trees, towering into the sky like masterful, imposing skyscrapers. Then there was the vast, interminable, ceaseless sky that was so blue day after day, so vast, so boundless, so immeasurable, with often barely a cloud in sight. Then in the early evening, when the sun set over the valley, my words are not adequate to describe the awesome magnificence or blended mastery of the orange, golds, and tangerines that swept across the horizon in a curtain or a flamboyant sequence of ravishing but blazing colours. I'd always wanted to take one of those hiking trails myself, from beyond Virginia's backyard, that is, past the boundary line of her white picket fence, where the land rolled onwards and upwards in an undulating curve, up a steep, precipitous gradient, overlooking a V-shaped valley, where at its base, surrounded by tall willow trees, there was a sparkling silvery lake that twinkled and glittered like a shimmering silvery jewel in the noonday sun. Regretfully, I'd never managed to find the time to explore that resplendent expanse of wood green, but I most certainly made a mental note of it, of things I wanted to do, that is, over a weekend in the not-too-distant future with my fiancé Kenneth. I had heard from all the local dog walkers that the place was like a living fairy tale. It was that idyllic. Imagine my surprise when Virginia was at the door with her little Yorkshire Terrier cradled in her arms. The naughty, feisty ball of fur would normally be hiding under the bed right now, waiting for me to lure her out, but not today. "Hello," I said, climbing out of my truck, closing the door behind me. "This is a turn-up for the books," I teased. "I thought I was coming around to bribe Molly Moo out of her hiding place, but it seems that I don't need to do that this morning. Miracles never cease. Perhaps this is my lucky day." Virginia did not smile at my breezy humour. This was so unlike her. I watched her head turn from the right to the left, as if she was looking for something outside her front door, something that bothered her considerably. I'd never seen her behave like this before. She seemed almost fragile, delicate, vulnerable if you like a china doll that was in danger of breaking. That was when I noticed her whole body appeared to be trembling like a jelly. It looked like she was fighting back tears she didn't want me to see, but I'd seen them, hiding there behind her eyes, too frightened to make their appearance known, but they were there. Invisible to most, but visible to me. "Come with me," I said, taking charge over Virginia. as if her house had somehow become my own. I pushed her forward into her sunny kitchen, drawing out one of her zooty-looking bar stools, aluminium silver, with a red leather base that fringed her large black granite island, or eating area if you like, along with 6 other identical stools. It was quite a stylish modern kitchen, very contemporary for someone from Virginia's generation. "Sit down," I ordered, placing the red kettle on the gas hob. "I'm going to make a cup of tea for you. Very sweet tea with a touch of brandy in it for strength. I can see you're going to need it. You look fragile and exceedingly drawn." "Oh, do I?" said Virginia. "I do feel a little out of sorts, I admit. I didn't have a very good sleep last night. If I have a rough night, it tends to really upset my day." I took Molly Moo out of her arms, placing her on the black and white tiled floor, where she promptly ran to the front door and began yapping and scratching madly, as though she was eager to escape. I'd never been privy to this nonsensical behaviour before. The feisty terrier usually wanted to run away from something rather than run to something, but what? I couldn't imagine. "She's been like that all night," said Virginia, yapping and scratching. She wouldn't stop. "She's itching to go into the yard, but I won't let her. Not for a while, that is." Suddenly the floodbanks burst open, while tears began spilling down Virginia's cheeks. She wiped them away with her fingers, seemingly self-conscious to be caught blubbing in front of me. She straightened herself out awkwardly, stroking down her cardigan, while blowing her nose into a tissue that I had handed her. "Dear, oh dear," she tutted. "Sorry. You must excuse me. I don't know what the matter is with me. I must have got out of the wrong side of the bed this morning. If I was significantly younger, I would say it was the menopause, but I'm afraid I don't have any good excuses. It's just what it is. One of those days, I suppose." Virginia was a woman made from steel, with a cast iron grit and determination, who had grown up with old-fashioned values, in an environment when showing your emotions was never actively encouraged. For indeed the act of shedding tears was tantamount to an unforgivable sin, for it was not right to burden others with your troubles or grievances. As her mother had always told her growing up, we don't air our dirty laundry to all and sundry. It would seem maintaining a stiff upper lip was the way to remain dignified in all manner of eventualities, whether good or bad. But on this autumn morning, Virginia was unable to hold the act together. The cracks were showing. The pretend everything is all right mask was slipping, sliding down her face like the melting wax of a burning candle, beginning to unveil the frightened woman that lay hidden behind the fractured veneer. It was dismantling, disrobing, disassembling, and quite simply falling apart, revealing a truth that could no longer be hidden, nor disguised or concealed. Even one not blessed with the gift of discernment would ultimately perceive that something was very wrong with Virginia this morning. All credit to her courage, she did try fighting off her rising, turbulent emotions that beat against her mind like the restless roaring waves against the rugged rocks at sea. Sooner or later, when the ship crashed onto a rock, whether you liked it or not, it was going to start to sink or fall apart. As it came under strain, the cracks were visible, no longer invisible. Once seen, there is too much evidence to deny its truth. Virginia was in that predicament, unable to deny to me, try as she might, that there was not something that was deeply troubling her. Whatever it was, I needed to get to the bottom of it. She was an old lady, a recluse, not known by many in the area, so this was my perfect opportunity to help her. Well, that was if I could. "I'm not going to do Molly Moo's hair today," I told Virginia. "I'm here exclusively for you, as long as you need me." Virginia looked heartily relieved, as if my words brought her a great measure of reassurance. "Really? There's no need," she said. "I'll be fine on my own." "Don't be silly," I piped. "I want to stay." I boiled the kettle, piling 3 large teaspoons of sugar in Virginia's tea, and of course a huge glug of brandy, sliding it across the island to where she was sitting. "Well," I grinned, "anything with brandy is going to taste good, isn't it?" I pulled out the bar stool next to her on the island, reclining on the comfortable seat. I noticed she was still shaking, while her pale face had grown significantly whiter. I reached out to squeeze the woman's hand encouragingly. It felt as cold as ice to the touch. I could feel her whole body was shuddering and quaking, as if she was absolutely petrified. "My father always used to say a problem shared is a problem halved," I said. "I know you don't like to burden people with your troubles, Virginia. You're also very old school like my grandfather was. Stiff upper lip and all that. While it's commendable, sometimes the best thing we can do to heal ourselves is to let it out. Please tell me, what is it that's troubling you? I'd really like to help if I may. If I can, of course." "It's not something that can be helped," said the old woman. "No more than you can go back in time to prevent JFK's assassination. It can't be undone." "What can't be undone?" I asked. Virginia's eyes grew as wide as saucers. "What I saw last night," she said. "It can't be undone. I cannot pretend I did not see them. I cannot undo anything that they did." "See who, Virginia?" I asked. Virginia began to shake and wobble all over again, like someone who has hypothermia who's been retrieved from the depths of an icy cold lake. "I tell you what, Virginia, tell me everything from the very beginning, as if you were writing a story about what happened last night. Try and look on it in a detached, abstract sort of way, as if you were watching a movie. Pretend you're a character in this movie. You're telling me everything you saw at the theatre. Try and dissociate yourself with the woman who plays your part. You are no longer her, but a character that's playing her. Do you think you can do it? Please just try." "I'm not sure," she said. "I'll try and give it a go." This was the story she told me. "Well, it all started at about 12 o'clock last night, when I heard a thumping sound on the roof of my home. It was like boom, 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 as if someone was walking over the slate tiles. I wasn't actually scared. I don't frighten easily. Well, not usually. I've never been bothered about the dark before either. Molly Moo, of course, was making a huge commotion. She can be fearless too. Inside the house she was yapping and scratching at the front door, wanting to go out. She sensed something was out there, but I've never seen her react quite like that before. I think she thinks she's a lion when she's in fact a tiny terrier. She's blindly oblivious about her small size. She seems to think she's really big. I remember her once trying to attack a Rottweiler at the local doggy park, but fortunately for her, he was a mellow fellow and put up with all her yakking. I locked her in my bedroom last night, venturing out of the house with my late husband's rifle in my hands. I wanted to circumnavigate the house to see if I could see who or what was thumping on the roof. I knew it could be a raccoon, but I also thought that was doubtful because the footfall was exceedingly weighty. It was a rather peculiar, weird experience being there in my backyard. It was then that I noticed that there was no chirping crickets or croaking frogs, which is very unusual for this part of the world. It felt very out of place. On the contrary, everything was airily quiet. It was so soundless, there wasn't even a slight wind blowing. I sensed something was distinctly off. It was like the backyard felt menacing, almost as if it was cloaked in a dim, gloomy blanket of darkness that was so black and murky it was almost evil. In all my years living on this earth, I have never physically felt evil up close and personal like this, but on this occasion it was so tangible I could smell it, feel it, and literally taste it, before I even actually saw it. It's hard to describe the discomposing feeling, but it certainly sent chills down my spine, turning my stomach into twisted knots, making you feel nauseously queasy. It's like every single part of you is warning you to run for your life. I wish I'd listened. After a second I saw a dark, solitary shadow looming and standing over the roof, staring down at me, with hostile, malevolent, blazing red eyes, the colour of traffic lights. It was possibly the most intimidating, petrifying thing that I've ever seen. I could sense it was very intelligent, incredibly cunning, superior in its reasoning to that of a wolf or a fox. It seemed to look through you as if its eyes could read your very thoughts. It was hideous, guileful, and about 6 foot tall, covered in jet black hair that was blacker than the night. It possessed the head of a wolf, with canine teeth that were so sharp, treacherous looking. They looked as if they'd been filed down into sharp blades. The creature had human-like hands, with sharpened talons for nails. It also had a tail that was thick and full, like that of a German shepherd dog. This thing stood upright, erect like a man, walking on 2 long legs. Truly, I thought it was a demon from hell itself. It jumped off the roof, lunging towards me, blocking my way back to the front door so that I couldn't get back into the house. At this, tears poured down Virginia's face. All I could think about was who was going to look after poor Molly Moo when I was gone. I just knew then that I was about to meet my maker. My death seemed almost imminent, or predetermined, if you like. This thing made his intentions clear. He wanted to eat me. I was certain of that. I think he was walking on my roof to lure me out of my house so that he could finally pounce on me, tearing me apart limb from limb. I think he saw me as a very easy target. A little old lady with a tiny dog is hardly a challenge for a creature like that. For all I know, he could have been watching my comings and goings for days at a time. Nothing would surprise me. These things, they're clever, they're crafty. Well, what happened next? I asked. Well, my hands were trembling so much. I began trying to shoot at the creature, but every single one of my bullets ricocheted. I was never a good shot anyway when my husband taught me how to hunt all those years ago. But under heightened stress and duress, your coordination goes awry, because you need to shoot with a steady hand. And I couldn't. The creature was growling at me like a savage dog. Only this was a lot deeper. It was like a low, rumbling growl at the very back of his throat, infinitely more disturbing and much more threatening. I just remember letting out the loudest scream. I called out for help. Help! 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 Begging for someone to hear my frantic calls. I knew it was probably pointless, but if by some random chance a person was out there, then maybe, just maybe, they might possibly hear me. Maybe they might come to my rescue. I was praying that in my heart. Please, God, I begged, don't let me die. Send me an angel. If you let me die, no one will look after Molly Moo. My father once told me that screaming can scare some predators away. So I screamed and I screamed, but the creature seemed to enjoy my distress. It appeared unfazed. It was like he got pleasure from my fear. Almost in a response to my scream, the next thing I knew was a monstrous beast came thundering through the forest. And I promise you, I'd never ever heard anything like this before. It was truly as if the earth groaned under the weight of this thing. It was almost like the floorboards heaving, but this was the ground heaving. It sounded like a rhino in full charge. It was grunting, snorting, snarling. I remember thinking that this was another demonical creature coming my way. And this night was getting progressively worse with every passing second. It was then that I recognized it as the old Bigfoot I'd seen from time to time on my land. We've often exchanged passing glances at each other, but he's always had very kind eyes and would hold my gaze, nod, and then just glide away. I always liked him. He struck me as a gentle giant, an elusive fellow, a little of a recluse like me. Perhaps that's why I understood him, and maybe he understood me as well. He was a big fellow, but grey all over, with long flowing hair towering at about 7 foot tall, with a pyramid-shaped head. All of a sudden, I realised that the Bigfoot was the sweet angel that God had sent to rescue me. I could hardly believe it, that this unlikely stranger, whom I barely knew from a bar of soap, would so selflessly and generously come to my defence. I mean, I'm not sure if the boot were on the other foot, I would have put my life in jeopardy for someone I barely knew. But this Bigfoot, he didn't hesitate. Not even for a single second. My heart quickened in pace as the Bigfoot pounced onto the wolfman and started tackling him. It was like 2 wrestlers in the ring attacking each other. The Bigfoot used the power of his fists to subdue this creature. I took that golden opportunity to race back into my home, bolting the door behind me, watching the scene unfold before my eyes from the patio window as the outside light still remained on. The Bigfoot was punching the wolfman's face, bludgeoning him to death. It was fast, quick, efficient, and painless. A good way to go. I thought it was all over. I really did. But it was only beginning, said Virginia, tears rolling down her face. What do you mean, only beginning? I asked. There were 3 more of these hideous, ugly things with wolf-like faces. They came gliding through the woods. When they saw the limp body of their dead friend, They began to howl. They howled exactly like wolves, no different. But they became so rageful, so incandescent with rage. They launched an attack on the old Bigfoot. They were so hostile towards him. The hate that they had for that Bigfoot was just off the charts. I've never seen such hatred. This time, the Bigfoot, he didn't stand a chance. For a start, he was old, and he was outnumbered by these hideous things. They began to wrestle him to the ground, punching and biting his face. They killed him easily. I couldn't watch. It was too distressing. But I knew he was dead. Then these grotesque beings vanished into the woods. One of them carried their fallen comrade over its shoulders. Then they were gone. I stared at Virginia in disbelief. The Bigfoot? What happened to his body? It's out there, in the front of the house. I can't even go and look at it, said Virginia. I want to give him a decent burial, because he saved my life. It's the very least thing I could do for him in the circumstances. Poor thing. I took Virginia in my arms, while she sobbed like a baby on my shoulders. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that brave Bigfoot. Don't you worry. We'll give him a great send-off, I said. I'll get my fiancé to dig the grave for us. We'll buy some nibbles and pretty flowers, and we'll have a proper little funeral for him in your backyard. I promise you, I told her. Really, said Virginia. Oh, that would be so lovely. Virginia took me out of her sliding doors towards the deceased body of the Bigfoot. I noticed his head had been brutally attacked. I never expected to find myself weeping, but I did. I couldn't help myself. Even in death, this wizened creature had a kindly expression on his face. Well, what was left of it, that is. I think at one time he may have been 8 foot tall, but with time he had gradually shrunk. His body was emaciated, not from lack of food, but just from being old and shriveled. I studied the creature intensely, making a special attempt to smell the body. I was expecting to smell something vile and repugnant, but his body smell was inoffensive. I detected a very slight smell of sweat under the armpit, but I have smelt far worse smells in locker rooms before at the gyms after workouts in the likes of cheesy trainers and pongy human sweat. This creature's was hardly discernible. Its hair was grey and fine like human hair. At one time I imagine it may have been totally black. The hair swathed his entire body, with the exception of his leathery grey face, his fingers, his palms, and of course the soles of his feet. Those were also cushioned compared to ours. This creature definitely had a very short neck, along with a long mane of head hair that covered it completely, a moustache and a beard. He looked exactly like a wild man, with very little ape-like influences to his appearance, which were possibly only discernible in his overlong arms, and of course the cone-shaped face of his head. To cut a long story short, we did have a fabulous funeral ceremony for the Bigfoot, who had saved Virginia's life. It was a very moving event. Kenneth, my fiancé, dug the grave beside the creature's dead body, so that all we had to do was roll it into the open grave. We sang songs, prayed, and had a little party, releasing a few white hot air balloons into the sky. Moments after the release, soaring into the sky above us with such majesty and grace was a golden eagle, a clear sign from the Bigfoot that he was now at peace. It brought us so much joy and comfort. This happened in 2004. I'm so glad to inform you that Virginia never had any more problems with those wolf-like creatures, but she swore they were the most evil, despicable creatures that she has ever encountered. But what they were is still open to argument. Sadly, Virginia died in 2012, along with little Molly Moo, who died 2 months later. I happen to know this because I took her under my wing for the last couple of months of her life. I often look back on the day at the mobile dog parlour when everything did not pan out in the way that I'd expected. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, that story was so moving. It really made me cry. Until next time, goodbye and good night.